Welcome to This Week in Habsland. I am Jordan and I am joined by my co-host Brian. We are here each and every Monday to discuss all things Montreal Canadiens. You can find us on social media, Blue Sky and TikTok at Habsland Pod. So after our week off, we will be discussing on this week's episode of the podcast a recap of the Four Nations face-off that gripped the hockey world over the past 10 days or so. Start to look forward just a little bit to the Olympics in 2026 and that tournament. But first, the show is called This Week in Habsland, and the Montreal Canadiens did play a hockey game on Saturday night against the Ottawa Senators. So let's start with that, Brian. We'll get to the Four Nations in a bit, but I figured we should probably do some Habs stuff off the top, kind of resetting the season now that we're 56, 57 games into the season. And I do want to say at the top of the episode, thank you for joining me, Brian, because I know you're quite ill. So if I end up talking a lot more on this episode for the listener, that's because I'm trying to help my teammate out here, trying to balance out the workload.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Thoughts on the Habsland headline for this one game really is hockey is fun. ... when the opposing goaltending sucks, because there's an alternate view of this if you're an Ottawa Senators fan of like what an absolute crash landing back down to earth after watching the quality of hockey at the Four Nations and then turning on your favorite team and have them play so poorly. Luckily, the Canadiens, and some guys specifically I'm sure we'll get into, played a heck of a game. And at least from a Habs fan standpoint, it was like, okay, this is not as rough of a drop in quality, because when you score 5 goals and win on the road against one of your bigger rivals, feels pretty good.
Yeah, that feels great, especially a rival that you're also happening to be chasing for a playoff spot. They happen to have the second wildcard spot. Obviously, that might change by the time this airs, but it seems as though right now Ottawa is at least battling with Columbus, Detroit, Boston. So they're very, very much in the mix right now, and it's great for Montreal to start closing that gap a little bit. Because obviously the goal here is still playoffs, and winning against one of your rivals and a team that's above you helps that a great deal. Now, to the headline itself, the hockey's fun when the opposing goaltending sucks. Hockey also sucks when your own goaltending's bad. So you're right to point out, I feel for the Ottawa Senators fans and players. Who knew that their entire team revolved entirely around Brady Tkachuk? He's not in the lineup, and they play I don't know, a peewee hockey team. It just was so disjointed, their play. And I was going to throw in a headline, but yours I like better. But the other headline I could throw in is thank you, Drake Batherson, because it's more like a 3-2 game without Batherson's incompetence. And then again, it's also more like a 3-1 game without Matheson's. So mistakes at both ends. But the Habs at least looked ready to play.
That's exactly right. If you look at the Canadiens' goals, Galley scores off a brutal turnover. Caulfield is a rebound. Anderson is a rebound. Slavkovsky's goal, and he had earned a goal, but even that's kind of it's a Suzuki pass that should have been intercepted that makes its way to Slaf, and then a shot that kind of should have been stopped. It was sloppy all around from the Senators, and the Habs, credit to where credit is due, took advantage of it at every single turn. About the Brady Tkachuk stuff, it does kind of go against my narrative of I don't think he should be the team captain for the Senators, because as we saw him play for Team USA, when he's kind of a little bit to the side, I find he plays a little bit freer and more naturally, and he doesn't have to worry about the captaincy. But yeah, he was missing on Saturday night, and the Sens did not have that edge. We don't care about the Senators. From the Habs standpoint, the biggest, not surprise, but the best part about Saturday night was the play of, in my opinion, and tell me if I'm wrong, Brian, of Juraj Slafkovsky.
No question.
Best player
100%.
on the ice.
Yeah.
I can't say it with 100% certainty, so I'll reframe this part where I'll say it was at least one of his best games of the season. It could have been his best. I can't say that definitively. I don't remember all his 50-plus games before that, but certainly one of, if not his best game of the season. He was hitting everything in sight. He was being aggressive on the puck. He was being better with his feet, and he got a goal. He got a fight in. He also helped create what ended up being the Caulfield goal when he won the puck on the boards.
Yes.
He was fantastic. And you got to wonder if, let's keep an eye on him. I mean, we always keep an eye on Slaf. Keep an eye on him down the stretch. I wonder how much these 2 weeks off did for him. We don't like to speculate about injuries, but I said last time, you got to wonder. you got to wonder if something was going on, and you think maybe sitting for 2 weeks and healing a little bit. Now he comes back and he's full Slaf.
Yeah, and part of that is what you had pointed out also on the last episode, which was that he wasn't moving his feet. He was just sort of reaching. Here he was moving his feet and he was barreling guys, and he was really implicated in battles. So it's just so clear to me. It's so obviously clear that when he's playing that way, he gets the results.
Yeah.
And when he's not playing that way, he doesn't get the results. It's that simple. Sometimes he'll get like a secondary assist or something like that. But to get a nice goal like this one, yes, because of a mistake, but you have to sort of create your own luck, I think.
Exactly.
And Slafkovsky did exactly that. He gave himself all the chances in the world. He gave his teammates a bunch of chances as well. And I do love that battle that created the ensuing goal. Like, his goal's great and all that stuff, but the battle really sort of showed me like, okay, Slaf's back. Now, the question is, can he hold that for the next 25 games? Can he keep it that level? If yes, then we could probably have a real discussion about what it would take for the Habs to make the playoffs despite not having Guhle. It was great to see Heineman, because we mentioned those two guys, right? Heineman and Guhle being out and how much that was hurting the team, especially Guhle. Heineman's back. That's great. So the lines seem to be very balanced again. Like, it's like they hadn't missed a step, and Heineman either. And then Guhle being out sucks, but Struble, I think, acquitted himself nicely. He did okay. He was on his opposite side. That's hard. But I think he did okay. And Carrier Matheson as a pairing was okay. And like, this could still work. Do you see any, maybe this is like glass half full thinking, right? Because we are several points out of a playoff spot, and one of our better defenders, probably our best defensive defender, is out. But it's still feasible, right? I'm not crazy.
No, you are crazy. They're not making the playoffs. But like, what was interesting, right before the break, we were talking about, like, are they spiraling or are they not? I was trying to argue, not really, because they're still doing some good stuff. And you were saying, yeah, but they're basically losing every game. This was an at least, and you mentioned the Struble, like, Struble Hudson looked pretty darn good to me at first glance.
Yeah, they were good.
They needed to put some nice games together and have those turn into wins. So, like, the doom and gloom that was the last 2 weeks or so before the Four Nations break, I think that was very nicely wiped off with this win. So I'm confident saying, like, it was a nice bounce back. Everybody got the rest. Everybody went to Cabo. They went to Cancun. And now they've come back. Well, other than the three guys who went to the Four Nations, but whatever. They've come back. They're maybe a bit less banged up, and they looked really good. Going back to Slafkovsky.
Yeah, sure.
You were mentioning luck. Like, oh, it's, you got to create your own luck. I love this one saying. I've heard it. I think the Liverpool coach a while ago, Jurgen Klopp, said it. And it's, luck is the residue of design. And to me, that is, like, when people say, like, oh, you got lucky, like, you didn't really deserve it, you got lucky. Right. But based on how you perform, whether it be in life, in sport, whatever, if you're doing something enough and developing enough opportunities, eventually you will get lucky. So the more opportunities you create, the more opportunities there are for luck, quote unquote luck. So I just love that. Luck is the residue of design. That was Slafkovsky on Saturday night. You're just doing hard work, playing well in the right spots. Eventually, you'll get a good bounce. That's just how it works. So it's not like, well, he got lucky, he scored. It's more like, well, he put himself in so many opportunities that he was bound to eventually get a bit of a good bounce.
Yeah.
Also on Slafkovsky, and this is something I want to start tracking a bit better, not only for him, but for a bunch of guys, is how are they producing at 5-on-5? Because I find there's such a premium right now on power play one. Mike Matheson's the first guy that I think about when it comes to this. Like, his point total year over year, last year to this season, is going to be wickedly different. But how much of that is really because of the fact that he's off power play one? And I think similarly with Slafkovsky, he was still on power play one, but Patrick Laine's jumped into the first power play, and he's scoring. By the way, what a goal that Laine, and the setup by Lane Hudson, incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Like, what does your production at 5-on-5 look like year over year? I'm wondering if that is a more appropriate kind of benchmark for, well, what's their play been like? And if you look at Slafkovsky, his points per 60 at 5-on-5 has actually gone up at 5-on-5 this year compared to last. Now, his goal scoring is a bit down. His assists are a bit up. We can get back to the goal scoring in a second. But overall, like, from a production standpoint at 5-on-5, he is slightly better than he was last year. It's the power play where he's down pretty considerably. I think it's around from 3.5 points per 60 to about 2.6. And that's the Patrick Laine effect.
And the Hudson effect.
That's just how it works. And like as Ivan Demidov comes in, someone's getting bumped from power play 1. It might be Slavkovsky. Who knows? We also don't know what the long-term future is for Patrick Laine on this team. So point is, like, there's different ways to look at Slavkovsky's success this year, and I think as the season gets longer, we get a bigger sample size. I'm wondering if it's really just 5 on the power play where the production's gone down a bit, but it's very easily like it's opportunity there. The one thing he's not doing, we complained about it last year, is he doesn't shoot the puck enough. He shot just under 2 shots per game last year. He's even lower this year. I think he's about 1.4 shots per game. That's if he makes that up, and I didn't check if that's 5 on 5 versus power play, but I would presume it's mostly a 5 on 5 dip. Part of that is like you need to be in the offensive zone a little bit more, but if he can clean that up and take more shots, I think these last 25 games, there's an opportunity for him to kind of, increase his quality of play and kind of put to bed, not any real concerns because he's still 20 years old, but kind of reassure everyone within the organization and maybe himself of like, don't worry, I am still like one of the key guys going forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that really does. And you're right to point out the Laine effect. I think it also extends to Lane Hudson because most of the points that Slaf was getting on the power play last year were assists. And now this assist master comes to the point, and now most of the attacks are top to bottom rather than bottom across the slot. The attacks were primarily top to bottom last year too, but there was a great deal more of going down to Slavkovsky and then a seam pass, through the crease to the bumper position to somewhere else. He's being utilized less because they don't have to use him. If you can win the draw to Hudson and he just passes to Laine and there's a goal, why do anything else? That's sort of, it seems like that's been their mentality. So like it's, at least on the power play front, there's that. At 5 on 5, I'm so not worried about this, and I know you're not coming from a place of worry when you're bringing this up. You're coming from a place of like, well, how could Slavkovsky improve? How could we get good Slaf all the time? He just has to play like he did against Ottawa. That's literally all it is. Because at 5 on 5, he was great. He was all over the place on the ice.
The one thing I will say is maybe don't drop the gloves. It's fine when it matters. I don't think up 5-2 in the third period is an appropriate time for Juraj Slavkovsky to drop the gloves. I
agree with that for like injury thing. Yeah. Like you don't want to see him break his hand on Greek's face. You'd rather see Greek's face break on Slavkovsky's hand. That's a very fair point. In a close game, maybe do it more, but he's a star, or at least he's developing into a star, we hope. And so do stars fight other than the odd few? Not really. And there's a good reason for that.
Yeah. 2 other things I wanted to hit on quickly. One, I'm sure you'd love. Actually, you probably want to talk on both of them. One is Brendan Gallagher is now tied with Thomas Plekanec for 17th all time in Montreal Canadiens goal scoring at 233, 2 behind Toe Blake, who's at 235. Is Galley scoring 20 this year, Brian? He's at 15 now. If you would have told me earlier this season, last year, the year before that, Brendan Gallagher is going to have one more 20-goal season, I don't know if I would have said, like, yeah, for sure. I think we did an over-under last year. Was it 12.5 goals? Something like that.
It was around there, 12, 13 maybe.
He's at 15. He's had knock on wood, he's been relatively healthy these past 2 seasons. Can Galley get to 20?
He can. He certainly can. Will he? That's another question. But like he's on pace probably. I haven't done the math because you're just throwing this question at me, but he's probably on pace for 21, 22. He keeps on that and he can certainly do it. I mean, giveaways to him in the slot really do help.
Helps.
Again, thank you, Drake Batherson. So maybe more of those for Galley. But his drive, his determination is clear every single night. He wants to be on the ice playing as long as he possibly can and be a part of this team. And I would love to see him get to 20. I think he deserves it. Yeah. He deserves to be on par with these Habs legends. Like Plekanec is a more recent name, but when you talk about Toe Blake, oh my God, that absolute legend. Are you kidding me?
The list coming up here, it's so the people he's passed this year: Stéphane Richer, Max Pacioretty, and he's technically tied with Plekanec, but if you're going by a tiebreaker of games played, he's above Plekanec. The next 3 guys on the list are Toe Blake, Bob Gainey, and Mats Naslund.
Oh my goodness.
So great company. It's the most heartwarming part of the entire season is Brendan Gallagher. And
his resurgence.
Protect him at all costs. The last thing I wanted to bring up before we wrap up the Habs talk. Look, next week, 3/4 mark of the season, we're gonna fully dive in. It's just not much to glean from this Sens game. So last bit, Brian, the reports of David Reinbacher's lost 2024-2025 season have been greatly exaggerated. Our boy is back. He's played 2 games for the Rocket. I watched the Friday game. Looked pretty good. It's still a guy who you can tell has not played hockey in 4 months, but it doesn't mean he wasn't one of their better defensemen immediately. And man, that's cool. Like, first of all, 19, 20-year-old knees heal real fast. They heal real fast.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm telling you, that injury to me or you, Brian, or any other like normal human being, a year and a half. Him, 4 months.
Year and a half and never the same.
Yeah.
And afterwards, like every, when it's humid out, you're like, oh man, my knee's killing me.
So just a quick note on him, right? Like, he's back. He's going to play 20 something regular season games with the Rocket. The Rocket have been phenomenal this season. I usually don't care about don't call this guy up. We want to make sure the Rocket are good. I've kind of been annoyed with that discussion for the past couple years when they were a borderline playoff team. Now that they're kind of top of the North Division, I'm actually fully on board with make sure the Rocket are good so they can get a deep playoff run for a lot of reasons. Like, you want Owen Beck to get big professional games. I'm sure Mayu will be down there as well. Sean Farrell has turned it around. You're going to want to see that. But really, it's David Reinbacher. If you get the 20-something regular season games and another 15, 20 playoff games, all of a sudden he's played 40 games. Knock on wood again. But there's a universe where he ends up playing quite a few games here, and it's not a lost season. That's
amazing. Considering where we thought we were when it occurred.
Yeah.
Oh man, lost season. Pack it up. See you next year. That is absolutely not the case. This is tremendous news, Jordan. I'm so thrilled about this. A huge piece of the future, blue chip prospect on the right-hand side where we need it most. And in those 20-odd regular season games and hopefully a deep playoff run, I think that he'll exhibit something that we as Habs fans haven't seen from him yet, because in that, I won't call it a lost season because he was still playing hockey, but that really rough development year last year, we didn't get to see him perform in games that mattered basically ever. 10 games into that season, everybody sort of knew, okay, we're not making the playoffs. So now he's on a team that every decision he makes, every time he touches the puck, every back check, everything matters. So I'm really excited to see how he picks up the pace, picks up his game in games that really matter. And that's a real telltale sign about a future NHLer is, how do they react when the games actually matter? Do they jump up a level? And most great players do. Absolutely.
Okay. So that's David Reinbacher. I'm sure we're going to talk about him more and more as his season really gets the kickoff. Let's transition now into, it's technically part 2 of the episode, but it's really our breakdown of the Four Nations face-off, our recap of it. So we got a lot of things I think we need to talk about here, Brian. At the top of it, you and I did our preview. I basically did a couple previews. One was on the roster itself way back in, I think, November. And then the next one was, I think, earlier this month in February, if not towards the end of January, just previewing the tournament as a whole. And we were saying, walking in, we're like, well, this feels kind of sterile and manufactured. And I think our hype for this, our excitement for this tournament was a bit muted. Having seen the tournament now, of course, having gone through it, what are your overall thoughts on the tournament? Because I think there's some elements that we certainly underestimated in terms of the quality of the hockey, how much the people would care. But overall, the tournament's a success. I'm not asking that question.
Yeah.
But walking away from the Four Nations, what are your thoughts on it?
It was far cooler than I thought it was going to be. The games, the quality of play was excellent. We predicted that. We knew the quality of play would be awesome because these are some of the best players in the world, a lot of the best players in the world competing. What surprised me, I think, was the abilities of sort of lesser players to shine, which was really nice. And also, I can bring it to Canada and just talk about how nice it is that it's another sort of comeback victory, because we've had those in the past in other various tournaments. And so, and I don't mean in the final game comeback. I mean, lose to the USA. I think they actually sort of outplayed them a little bit in the round robin game, and I think actually USA had a bit of the edge in the final, though it was a little bit more even. but Canada got the results. And then McDavid scoring that winner was awesome. So like from a Canadian perspective, this was just awesome to watch, to witness. It's not the Olympics. It's not a big, meaningful tournament with all the countries still, but it was really nice to see Canada on top again.
Yeah, it still felt a little dopey not having Czechia there, not having Slovakia there. It wasn't it was an invitational. That's what this tournament was. It was an invitational. They invited 4 countries. The whole intent, and we even talked about how they scheduled the games. They needed Canada USA in the final. That's why Canada USA was game 2, match day 2, not match day 3. I think certainly the quality of the hockey was there. The players gave a crap from puck drop on night 1, Canada-Sweden, up until the McDavid goal in the final. And that goes for all 4 teams across the board. The forgotten game of this tournament that was actually low-key one of the best ones was Finland-Sweden on the Saturday afternoon before Canada-USA at the Bell Center. That game was a rocket. And those 2 countries hate each other when it comes to hockey. And you saw how much it meant to Patrick Laine afterwards with his quote. I mean, Patrick Laine loves to talk smack all the time. He does it too much. It scares me as a Canadiens fan that we'll be in a playoff series one day and he'll talk his head off after game 1 and then we can just get smacked. Anyways, that's a Patrick Laine anxiety thing, but he did it for Finland, so I didn't care. But he was out there talking smack before and after the game. So, quality was there. The players gave a crap. That was great. It's still a little dopey. Obviously, the part that we talked around a bit, but became, I think, the focal point, certainly before Canada USA won, was the political tension. And there's literally no avoiding it. This was, and this will be the reason. You and I were talking about we don't really remember the World Cup in 2004. We don't really remember the World Cup in 2016 other than the weird gimmicks. Were we going to remember the 4 nations? The political tension between Canada and USA caused by that orange man trying to take over our country sparked a lot of national pride in Canada. There was a lot of FU attitude towards our friends south of the border. And that is what I think took this tournament from a 7.5 out of 10 up to a 9.5 full 10 points out of 10.
Right. You
heard it in the anthems, the booing and the cheering. And when they went over to Boston, not totally reciprocated, although there was quite a lot of Canadian fans at the final, which I thought was very interesting. Not so much Americans in Montreal during the round robin. But that was it. When you combine the quality of hockey, which was the best hockey, it was at least Stanley Cup final level quality by the end, if not even better. But thinking back to game 6 and game 7 of Edmonton, Florida, and then walking into Canada, USA, I'm this is at least this quality, if not better. So you have that to start with. You have incredible Bell Center crowds, top notch, full marks. The Boston crowd was pretty good. Not very, very good, not Bell Center good, but they still brought it. And then when you add this wave of nationalism with what is your most better hockey rival, and it's becoming a rivalry off the ice as well, there was so much going on. There was the Kachuk stuff where they were the whole group chat nonsense with JT Miller, the organized fights, which some people have, I think, correctly pointed out that's them admitting to we're going to fight I think that's technically not allowed, but who cares? The whole they don't have group chats, we have group chats, and I forget if it was Brandon, if it was Cirelli or if it was Hagel who had the group chat meme after Canada wins. A lot of smack talk, mostly from Team USA, but that's okay. I don't mind it. I really don't care. It just creates bulletin board material. The tension was there. It started politically. It turned onto the ice. It never went away. Canada and USA were circling each other for 10 days until they met in the final. And that created a very special game and a very special moment that we're going to get to, obviously.
For sure. And now that we know the results and we know the sort of political climate that started this whole, the rivalry's always been there, but just jumped the rivalry up to a new level. And Trump saying we want to make Canada our 51st state. I do wonder now if we should be asking him if he wants to make, should the USA be the 11th province now that we slap them around in hockey? I mean, maybe even the 4th territory. Do they deserve to be I'm not sure, but thank you to a good friend of the show, Jim, for texting me that before the final, saying, hey, if we win, I'm going to send a letter to Trump saying that we're going to ask them to be the 11th province. So love that. Phenomenal conclusion to the rivalry, at least this year. Can't wait for the Olympics next year. It's going to be, I think, just as good, if not better. On the fights thing, because I do want to address this. You said it was sort of fine. I really hated that. The fights themselves were fun. It's a fun occurrence in hockey, yay. But for them to be pre-planned, it really felt like the NHL was like, there's not as much hype for this tournament as we'd like, so we want to hit the ground running. Who are the players on each team that could fight? Okay, talk to the coaches, get them to fight. Like, it just seemed fabricated. And maybe I'm being pessimistic about it, but it seemed totally not from the players' gusto.
Well, hold on. So, from what we've understood, it was completely decided by the two Tkachuk brothers and JT Miller. It was those three that said, we need to go in and quiet the crowd early on. We need to kind of reset the tone immediately. That is what it was. It is those three guys that said, we are going into this here and we are going to fight people. And then look, if Canada starts the McDavid line at the beginning, it's different, but they don't. So
right.
That's what it was. It was the Tkachuk brothers wanted to fight. You saw, but the most telling part is, again, they admitted to all of this after the game. So but the most telling part was after the first two fights, JT Miller was looking for a third guy to fight. And eventually, Canada accepted the tilt. But so that's what it was. Those three guys said, we need to come in. We need to kind of level set the crowd a bit because the crowd's going to be on fire to start. We got to come in and try to bully these guys around immediately. And again, I think the Tkachuk brothers and JT Miller were very honest about that's what they did. Again, I don't care. Team Canada clearly was up for it. The Bell Center absolutely loved it. The ironic part is, like, I was wondering when Canada was in Boston, I was like, well, what's Canada's version of this? Because while we talked about, like, we'll get into the roster construction, like, Canada was built as like a team with like a very much clear first, second, third, and fourth line to be like a quote tough to play against team, but not really like overly physical. Whereas Team USA, we kind of viewed them, other than their fourth line of old guys, as this is just skill. It was actually that the Team USA was the one trying to roughhouse rather than Canada that was trying to use skill. It was kind of like a mixture there. I was wondering what Canada was going to do to offset the Boston energy. And what happened was, because the USA, I don't know if it was the NHL or whoever it was, had 42 people on the ice to sing the American anthem, it took like a good 5-6 minutes to get them all off the ice. And that just took the air out of the building.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was so poetic, how like the idea was like, okay, Team USA, they had this, you can call it a brilliant idea to just take all the juice out of the building with all these fights. Have the two Tkachuk brothers fight, have JT Miller, these like big guys, tough guys fight. Like, Canada does not have a version of that, but to have, 42, 35 people on the ice, and just, it took forever to get the puck drop in the final. And I thought that was like, oh, this is how the air goes out of the building. And it did.
That was also really poetic because it was such a slap in the face to have, and not that the performer was bad. I think she was very nervous. She also altered the lyrics at one point to "Oh Canada," the vocalist from Canada who did our anthem. So she does that, and it's okay, and she's shaky because she's nervous because changing the lyrics and all that stuff. And then this orchestra comes out and blasts the American national anthem.
Yeah.
And then they lose the ensuing game. So that was very sort of poetic as well, of like during this turmoil of Canadians booing the American anthem first and then them jumping in and booing Canada because, retaliation is fun, I guess. And then having it come to a head with that, where they have this giant orchestra trying to upstage the Canadian national anthem. And it actually, as you pointed out, it actually shot them in the foot.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I'm forgetting who the honorary captain was against Finland, but I thought having Mario be out there for game one for Team Canada was sick.
Amazing.
Having George St. Pierre, like, very smart. Quebec legend, Canadian legend. Yeah. We love that. I forget who was game 3, but having Wayne Gretzky out there, considering the nonsense he's been involved in these last few months, it's like they did it intentionally. It's like
you think so? Yeah.
It's like they intentionally had him come through the U.S. dressing room onto the ice as quote unquote Canada's honorary captain. And yeah, that was a weird one. And then immediately followed by Krivyazik just not doing a good job at the anthem. Like, no, just very poor. Don't change the lyrics. I don't care what statement you're trying to make. Don't change the lyrics.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I agree with that.
And this is coming from someone who absolutely detests anthem at games. Although, again, for national games, completely understand why we do it. Don't change the lyrics to it. it was just a really weird energy for those like 10 minutes or so. Once Gretzky was out there, I was like, damn, that's terrible. But it is what it is. And there's this stuff too about like Team USA was making a big deal about President Trump, calling them the day of. There's the PK Subban stuff. I don't know if you want to get into that. There was just so much tension, like, and like, just like anxious energy, just building, like overflowing from one country threatening another country's sovereignty, that it was just inevitable that it got on the ice. And you saw John Cooper after the win say like, the boys needed this. We know Canada needed this, first, not 51st. And I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great line.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the political stuff. Let's park that now. Let's get more into the game. So, or even like the tournament. Like you and I both said Team USA was going to win the tournament. We've said it for months.
Yeah,
I think my finals prediction was 3-0 USA. I forget what yours was. I
said like 5-3 or 5-2.
It was higher
high scoring,
but still a multi-goal win for Team USA.
Yeah.
So what did we get wrong?
I definitely underestimated the Canadian forwards, because when you look up and down the lineup of each of these teams, and you can include Finland and Sweden in this if you want, but it really was Canada or USA to win this thing, I think. The Canadian forwards were just so strong, and the best ones really were the best ones, with the exception of McDavid until that last play, I think, which was kind of at the very last second, he pulled the parachute and landed nicely, I think, because I think a lot of flack was going to be continued to be thrown his way if he didn't sort of win it for Canada in the final there in overtime. But Crosby was absolutely outstanding. Sidney Crosby lives for Team Canada, the same way that he won 3 cups. Like, he lives for the playoffs too. But when he puts on a Team Canada jersey, he's maybe the best player of all time, and that's not a stretch to say that. I think even without that, he's in the top like 3-4 for most people.
Yeah.
And when he puts on a Team Canada jersey, he's just an outstanding, unbelievable, carry everybody on his back player, an exquisite leader, and hopefully a future Montreal Canadien winning his 4th cup.
So first of all, it was lovely to see Sidney Crosby in games that mattered again. And I'm just so sad. And that's the Habs part. Like, we wish, but it doesn't seem likely. Maybe. But you said it best. Like, he is the best hockey player to ever play for Team Canada. I don't think that's a stretch anymore. He has done it. He has golds in the World Championship, in the World Juniors, the Olympics, the World Cup, the Four Nations. Any tournament you feel like creating, Sidney Crosby will win it for Team Canada.
Yeah.
So it was absolutely amazing to see him play and do all that stuff. The part that I got wrong was, although I still think there's criticism to be levied at the forward group that they brought. I really do. But when you have the 2 best forwards in the world, makes up for a lot of the shortcomings.
Yeah, of course.
When you have Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon killing it, like, I thought MacKinnon was the best player in the tournament.
Yes.
McDavid still scored a bunch. Like, he still has that wicked goal against USA in the group stage, and he scores the big one at the end of the day when it mattered. I do think Jack Eichel had a pretty good hold on him. Not literal hold, but like, he clamped down on McDavid pretty good for a good chunk of that game, the finals game. McDavid and MacKinnon combined for 7 goals. The rest of the team scores 6. So I still think there's legitimate criticism of the forwards that they brought. But when you have the 2 best forwards in the world, and the other piece we didn't stop talking about for like the last year was goaltending. So hand up. I apologize. Jordan Binnington, you did it. Congrats. We did say, we had the conversation a few weeks ago, like, are we overthinking goaltending? Is it that big of a deal? And it was like, it's a short tournament. Canada's probably going to lose. We said it. We predicted a good chunk of this where we said they're probably going to lose to USA in the group stage. They'll probably beat Sweden in the first match. And then the rubber match will be the Finland match. They win that too. They're going to the final. And suddenly you just need Binnington to be pretty good. He was average for the first 3 games, the round robin. He was awesome in the final. He was incredible in the overtime. Like, my vantage point of it, and it's a little flipped from yours, which probably tells us that it was 50-50. I thought USA was a better team in the round robin game. I thought for the first 50 minutes or so in the final, Canada was definitely the better team, but Hellebuck was there.
Okay.
About 10 minutes left in the third, the wave of the USA, just waves after wave was hitting. And certainly in the overtime, I don't think anyone's going to fight and say, like, USA was playing better in the OT for the first 8 minutes and 11 seconds until that face-off, right? USA was the better team, and Jordan Binnington certainly in the overtime, stood on his head, kept Canada in it until we get to Austin Matthews' defensive masterclass. Has someone ever told you that Austin Matthews deserves a Selke trophy?
I have seen that countless times from very quote-unquote knowledgeable hockey people.
Yeah.
I hope this tournament puts that to bed. That one play should put that to bed forever.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Also, like
shut up. He has a good shot. Good for you. Good for you guys. Best shot in the league. He's not a defensive center.
It's just also funny that like the guy he went to go cover was Mitch Marner.
Yeah, exactly.
Hilarious
right.
stuff. Great stuff.
Because Marner knows.
Big game
he's not going to do a good job.
So yeah, I think that's like I like we thought Canada was like USA. I thought top to bottom of the roster had a stronger roster, certainly in net. I think interestingly defensively, the US they had too many similar guys, and you saw it with Adam Fox kind of get lost in the sauce, and they didn't even have Quinn Hughes there. You could also argue USA was like really banged up by the time they got to the final, right? Quinn Hughes didn't play the entire tournament. Charlie McAvoy wasn't in the final. Matthew Tkachuk, who it sounds like might be out for the rest of the season, was very banged up in the final. But I would also argue Canada's number 3, 4, and 5 defensemen didn't play in the final, and that Cale Makar was not 100% either, right? Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, Josh Morrissey didn't play in the final. So it's not like Canada was out there fielding 100% either. So I've heard those arguments being made of, wow, look how much healthier Canada was. Sure, there's no Quinn Hughes equivalent injury, but Canada was missing half their defensive core.
But that's hockey. That's a part of it.
Exactly.
This isn't badminton.
I wish.
Not that those guys can't twist an ankle or something like that, but this is hockey. Guys get hurt. You factor that in. And Canada having, I think, a bigger wealth of talent would have been less hurt by that as well. Mm-hmm. Like if Canada had lost their best defender in Cale Makar was outstanding. So maybe this is wrong what I'm about to say, but I do think that Canada would have had an easier time finding a suitable replacement than the USA did when Quinn Hughes was out. Is that a fair statement to make? It's probably similar, but
I think so.
Canada just has a wealth of
Makar
talent.
Also misses the Saturday game against Team USA. And how much does that game color in some of our opinion of the final as well? That, Canada's no worse than 4th best player at the tournament? Depends on what you feel about Binnington overall, but if it's McKinnon, then Crosby, then McDavid, I feel like that's the proper top 3, like 3 best Canadian players. Binnington and Makar are the next 2. Like those were the 5 best players for Team Canada at this tournament. Like one of your best players and your best defenseman wasn't in that Team USA game. He could have made a difference. Anyways, a lot of what ifs. Sure. Point is, it was pretty equal across the board. And it's the 2 best forwards in the world are Canadian, and the goalie showed up in the final, and that was enough to win this tournament.
Yeah, most importantly in overtime. Binnington really was just an absolute wall in overtime.
So coming out of the tournament, we talked a little bit about Marner. Which player do you think has benefited most from this tournament? And I don't just mean like, boy, they're going to gear up for a good playoff run. I mean like their legacy in terms of like, oh yeah, but remember he did this at the Four Nations, right? So like McDavid has the big moment. He has the goal.
Yeah.
But McDavid already has a freaking Conn Smythe. He hasn't won the big one. So maybe it's that for McDavid. It's an all-time goal. There's no denying it. It is this generation's version of the golden goal, light, diet golden goal. It's not the Olympics. It's not the Olympics at home in Vancouver.
Right.
But it's your biggest rival, and it's not too dissimilar of a shot. So you can go with McDavid. McKinnon being the best player on the ice in this tournament. It's like, did you all forget I have a Hart Trophy, that I have a Stanley Cup? Yeah.
He's my answer for sure, McKinnon, by the way. I'll let you finish the list, but he's 100% my answer.
Marner's the other guy who has, he comes and goes a bit in the tournament, but huge game winner against Sweden, sets up the defining goal of the tournament in the final. By the way, Mitch Marner looks pretty good in red. Just saying.
That he does.
I'm just saying.
He plays better in red too. I think.
I don't think he has a contract coming up. Just say. Anyways, I thought this tournament did a lot of good for Mitch Marner. And then we already talked about Crosby. He's the obvious one. Binnington as well. Like, there's a few other guys we can go down the list on, and it doesn't have to just be Canadians. Like, I thought there's some American players that you looked at, you're like, oh damn.
Well, I made fun of Zach Werenski I can't even pronounce his name.
Werenski.
Zach Werenski.
Yeah.
It's like rear wheel drive. I have to sound it out. I can't say that word either. It's W's and R's for me. But with Zach Werenski, all year he's been great offensively. Like he's just a really stellar player, and completely fell under the radar for me. And then in the tournament was just as good, and nearly leading the tournament in points as a defenseman. Like, holy crow, good for you, man. That's another guy that I think jumped to the forefront.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Hellebuck, it's too bad he didn't win because he's still missing the big one. And I have a question about him later on. But so you said your pick is McKinnon. I like it for Marner. I like just the little like.
That's a good answer.
Hey, like I'm not attached to the Leafs right now. Turns out I can make huge plays in games that matter. Multiple times, an overtime winning goal, and then in a trophy clinching assist in overtime. Like, so tell me about McKinnon though. Let's talk a bit more about him.
For McKinnon, it's literally just this. It's the fact that he constantly gets put behind guys like Draisaitl and Matthews. I've seen people put Stützle above him, like just silliness in terms of like the top centers in the league. Oh. And okay, that last one, those people are biased. There's no way you could even argue that point without being biased.
Stützle's not in the top 15. Matthews, we're talking all forwards or just centers?
No, centers.
Okay, no, okay, top 10
centers. But what? He's like 8th, 9th. You know, he's definitely not McKinnon level. But McKinnon, to me, and I said this as one of my predictions, that he would be. I don't remember if it was like the MVP or the most points or most goals or what, but I had him in one of those categories because he just shows up against the best players. He is so obviously better than anybody not named McDavid.
Or is he?
And I think, well, that's a great point. He might be better.
Might be.
At times he is.
Yeah.
And so I just think that McKinnon constantly gets thrown into this second tier of centers in the league. And the ones that piss me off immensely are the Matthews. The Draisaitl one I get, but I still think you take McKinnon on your team 10 times out of 10 over Draisaitl. And so I just like it that he basically in this tournament said, come on, quit messing around. It's me. I'm the guy. I maybe didn't score the golden goal, but who put us in a position to win? I did in a big way.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It is interesting. I've always definitively have McKinnon as the number 2 forward in the league, and like probably Draisaitl might be 3rd. I think there's a few other guys who might want to talk. I think Matthews wasn't the best tournament for Austin Matthews. If he is and that's always a good question. Like, who is the USA's best forward? Matthews gets the Leafs bump all the time, but you wonder, like, Jack Eichel had an okay tournament. Jack Hughes, wish you would have seen a bit more. Matthew Tkachuk is everywhere all the time, but I'm not sure that's always a good thing. And then Brady Tkachuk, I think that's a level, we're going down at least one grouping there. So that's that group. I don't want to ask a question about, like, we're hovering around Team USA in Canada. I've seen a lot of rhetoric about like USA can't get over the hump. They can't get through Canada. Is there a big brother, little brother thing with Canada and USA going on right now?
Well, so when you take a step back and see the forest from the trees, Canada is the little brother to the USA on like the world stage. I think you could say. I don't believe that, but I think the rest of the world sort of thinks that we're like their little brother, and we always follow suit whenever they go to war or something crazy. Like, it always seems that way. In hockey, it's the opposite. It's Canada's title to win all the time, and USA is often the little brother trying to be as good, and this time failing to do so, and most times failing to do so. So I think definitely, I think the answer to this is definitely yes. There's a big brother, little brother thing with USA and Canada. How long does that last with the USA? We've said it before, the USA having just a far superior development program for juniors than Canada does. How long does that last? And also just the sheer population thing and the exposure to hockey. Like, Canada's had it forever because hockey's our sport. The USA have baseball and football and a few sports that are above hockey in the basketball, above the tier list, where hockey gets put by the wayside. And so a lot of athletic kids who would have been incredible hockey players, if they're tall, they play basketball. If they're big dudes, they may play football. If they're good with their feet, they won't become a hockey goalie. They'll actually go play soccer. So, like, I think that has benefited us historically, but the population difference being, and I don't know the numbers right now, but like 5, 6, 7-ish times bigger in terms of population, the US to Canada, that just gives you a larger pool to pick from. And then also having better development for young players. Like in 10 years, will we be having the opposite conversation of how can Canada get back on top? And that certainly worries me.
I think it's very much like the victor gets to decide how history is written. I think if you look at the last 3 elimination games, the men's teams, this is different than the women's conversation. For women's hockey, it's a coin flip every single time they play. We have to say that. We're talking specifically about the men's. 2010 Olympics is an overtime win. 2014 Olympics is a 1-0 win in the semifinal. 2025 Four Nations overtime win. There's some round robin games in there. USA beats Canada in 2010. Canada beats USA in 2016. USA beats Canada again in 2025. So round robin's a bit easier, and I think just in general, men's best on best tournaments, the one like 2006 Sweden Finland is a 1-goal game. 2004 Canada Finland's a 1-goal game. Even 2016, which is Canada and Team Stupidity Europe, not their fault, just the NHL's fault for making it all gimmicky. That is also, it's a best of 3, but Canada wins the clinching game. I think it's 2-1. It's always very close, right? But you were saying want to see the forest for the trees. I think a good, we need a bigger sample. It's a small number of tournaments. If you just look at the World Juniors and the U18s this century, the USA has won 18 of them. Canada's won 15. So that might be hey, wait, what's going on here? USA is actually showing quite good. Now USA has not won an Olympic. They have not won a World Cup this century. They have not even won a World Championship, which we don't really count because the World Championships, you get the C teams and the D teams. But nonetheless, the USA has not won a World Championship. So it's weird at the senior level that they really can't seem to push through. But at the junior level, they are on equal footing. And like we've talked about, they might be better than Canada right now. The one thing that just comes up over and over again is Canada still able to develop these absolute elite level players. And the U.S. national team development program has been around for long enough now that I don't know if it's clear that they have become better organized from U16 through U20 than Canada is. They are more organized, and because of that, they do better at those tournaments. We're not counting Hlinka Gretzky because Canada just destroys that tournament. That's a weird invitational. The U18s and the World Juniors are the 2 big ones, the U8, which is U18 and U20. Team USA does better at those tournaments now because they have a much better structure. But even with that structure in place, in these last 10, 15 years, Canada has developed, the 4 or 5 best prospects, period? If we're just saying prospects, at the age of 18, how good were they? McDavid is 1, probably McKinnon is 2, Bedard's 3. I'm okay at putting Austin Matthews in. This is, again, as of age 18 when they're playing. Matthews is there. And then you have Celebrini. We have Gavin McKenna coming in a year. Yeah. The defensive kid Schaefer coming up this year as well. It's not just forward, it's defensemen as well. Canada is still developing the top tier talent. Goalies are a completely different story, and that's not a conversation for today. But so I don't see it as a big brother, little brother thing because I think senior men's hockey is so on a razor's edge. Every single elimination final game, it's a 1-goal game. When you look at the bigger sample of the juniors and the 18s, USA's done very well. But the USA, for some reason, have not been able to get that tier 1A+++ guy yet. We don't know. But not that they haven't had guys. Jack Hughes was incredibly well scouted. You have Patrick Kane, of course, back from the 06 draft. You have, of course, Austin Matthews we've talked about. There's been a lot of high-end US talent. They just have not matched the Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon, Celebrini, Bedard level. Yeah. So I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how you make up that gap when it seems like it's what you said. It's hockey is number 1, it's number 2, and it's number 3 in Canada. Whereas in the US, there's a big competition for what sport you play. And I don't know. I don't see that really changing going forward. And I don't think the population thing matters when it comes to that because you have half the country doesn't know what hockey is in the US. So population is kind of irrelevant there. They've been able to make up for it with how freaking organized they are from U16 through U20. Yeah. And maybe Canada eventually gets their stuff together and they get a little bit better at that part. But by age 16, Connor Bedard's we already know Bedard's going to become a star. We already know that Celebrini is going to become a star. We already know something's already been done. Like it's when you play hockey at 2 years old, I don't know. It's not like we're Canadians, we play hockey all the time, but despite the US's huge advances at the senior level, and it's not just the US, you can go with Sweden, you can go with Finland, Russia's the sleeping giant, but like despite the issues with Hockey Canada, Canada still seems to develop the highest, most elite level players.
Yeah, I mean, throughout history, the best player in the world at any given point has always been Canadian. The only caveat recently that I could even consider would be Ovechkin, because he's the purest goal scorer of all time.
Yes.
But even then, he's not American, so take him out of the discussion. It's Canada all the way in the Canada-USA discussion. Like, you go through history, Gordie Howe, Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby. That's 5 of the 8 in the Olympus, and whoever the other 3 are, that's a more interesting discussion, and we could do that maybe at a different day. But like, the best players in the world are Canadian. So you're right to point out that the most elite of the elite come from Canada. And it's, like you said, also, it seems to be continuing to do so. Celebrini, McKenna, Bedard, etc. So, but who knows? Maybe Demidov. Maybe Demidov will be the next one.
Yeah. Look, this is not to say the U.S. have not developed absolute super duper stars. They have. They've had Mike Modano. They've had Brett Hull. They've had Patrick Kane.
Of course.
They have developed absolute killers.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's like, I view it very much as like it's a 50-50 thing, and Canada just seems to come out, one step ahead in the final. And that's what decides history. Like, one play goes differently, and USA might have won the Olympics in 2010, or they might have won the Olympics in 2014 for that matter. But Canada's come out slightly ahead. I view it extremely close. Hockey Canada has its issues, and that maybe makes it too close. But nonetheless, let's look forward a bit to the Olympics. Maybe we can go quickly on this, because there's 2 more things I wanted to hit on. So one is, we've talked about the roster. What changes do you see as most likely? Like, can we maybe put goaltending aside for a minute? Because that's just like, we'll see where everyone's at December next year. It's probably Binnington. Yeah. If Logan Thompson is still, presuming he's a Vezina finalist this year, he'd probably be in the discussion. Probably not Monty anymore, but like, whatever. Forwards, defense. We didn't talk about Thomas Hartley yet. Like, holy moly, what a guy to be called in from. He was probably on vacation and was like, "Yo, can you make it to Montreal tonight?"
Yeah.
In and out of the lineup. Who do you see as like the biggest like candidates to be kind of taken out of the lineup based on their play? And I think that's where this tournament helps, whereas like you got to see some of these guys and you're like, I don't know if they have it for next year.
So my gut tells me that nothing changes because they won, and Canada seems to stagnate. Maybe stagnate's the wrong word, but they go status quo. Hey, we won. Why change anything? That being said,
there's one very obvious name from the forwards. I don't know if you're getting to him yet, but it's Brad Marchand for me.
Yeah, I would think so. I
feel like you're not thinking about, can he play international hockey? Can he play against Sweden? You're thinking about specifically the rematch versus USA. When you are building this 2026 Olympic team, it's okay, cool, but can he play in that game against USA? I don't think I saw that from Marchand. He wasn't able to keep up. I thought Markstone was good enough, and I think he's probably bubble guy next year. I liked what Hagel did for most of the tournament, but I think him they'll keep. I think Cirelli they'll keep, especially if Cooper's still the coach, because there's a comfort there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
but I do think there's 1 or 2 spots that might open up, and that's where Scheifele, that's where Suzuki, that's where if you kind of, and I still think they need more talent, Celebrini might come in, or if they're having better seasons, Lafreniere and Byfield, like the guys we talked about last 2-3 months ago in terms of making the team. So, but that's the main players to me. Like, I think there's same goes to like Travis Konechny. Like, I think there's spots to be had here, because when you are building this team next year, you know what the top 6 is more or less. You need to make sure your bottom 6 is able to not get caved in by Team USA. That's it. That's how you're building your squad next year.
Yeah, that's a very fair point, man. The guy I was thinking was Hagel, but I might be grasping at straws. You're right. I think it is Marchand. Yeah, actually,
because like flip out Marchand, put Suzuki in.
Yeah, they're drastic improvement. Yeah,
Suzuki wins face-off. Suzuki kills penalties. Not that they wanted to call any penalties. We didn't talk about it, but like Canada did have too many men on the ice. Like they did, 100%. Right. But also there was multiple holding the sticks from the Tkachuk brothers earlier in the game. Yeah. They didn't feel like calling it. So once they made that decision, nothing's getting called. They didn't want power plays. Yeah. So Yeah, that was kind of it. The main thing I saw. Like, I think there's, from the defense standpoint, Taves and McCarr are coming back. If Drew Doughty's healthy, I don't mind him in a lesser important role. I'd like to see Shea Theodore come back, Thomas Harley come back. From that point onwards, like, I think there's some spaces open on the defensive end. I don't know if Evan Bouchard makes sense. Like, this is where the U.S. got into trouble with having too many similar defensemen.
Yeah, all
I
offensive.
don't know if you have Cale McCarr, I don't think you need Evan Bouchard. Or like, he could be the eighth defenseman, very much like PK Subban was in 2014, whereas like, if this guy gets hurt from the power play, then you can make your way in. Like, if McCarr is out, then Bouchard can draw in, but otherwise Bouchard should probably not be playing. But I think there's a few more open spaces on the defense.
I think that's fair. I think Parayko is probably the most obvious name in terms of probably won't be there.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. Last question I wanted to get to wrap this all up. Canada and USA were the story of this tournament. Sweden and Finland kind of took a step back. Like, they were very much NPCs, where like they just happened to be in the background, kind of filling out the space. Do you see, like, as we jump into the Olympics, and we don't know exactly what the groups are yet for the Olympics because of Russia's eligibility, but we know Canada and USA will not be in the same group. Canada is most likely, if Russia's in their group, then I believe they're going to get Sweden and maybe Slovakia in their group. And then the hosts, Italy. So they should be fine to make it out. It's not a problem. I'd be shocked if they play Team USA before a semifinal. There's 12 teams at that tournament. Sweden and Finland will be there. Maybe Russia will be there. Do you see a sizable gap at this point between Canada, USA, who are, as we've said, are very much neck and neck, and then the next tier?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we just saw it with this tournament, and when you look at the amount of NHL players, and I'm not even talking star players, we already talked at length about how Canada produces most, if not all of most of the elite, star players. 41% of the NHL is Canadian, 29% is American, and then the next is Sweden with 9.3%. They have 66 guys in the NHL. So to create a team, you're using 1/3 of the players that are in the NHL, whereas Canada, you get to pick, like, it's not even 10% of all of the players that are in the NHL that will make the team. So you just have such a wealth of options at every position, except goaltending, but at every position, at forward and defense, what matters. You have such a wealth of options. And even the USA has that. Like I said, 204 players, 29%. So like not that far behind. And then the next is Russia. 46 players, 6.5%. What benefits them is that they have NHL caliber players, a few of them at least, in the KHL. So they can bolster their lineup with that. Finland's next, then it's Czechia, and then Switzerland and Slovakia are at about 1%, and Germany and Austria and all those teams are more like at 1%. So just in terms of the options you have, it's Canada, USA. And then in terms of the absolute star players, yes, Germany has Draisaitl and Stützle. But then, every other player on their team, they're going to have like 5 other NHLers, and then the rest will be...
It'd be so cool to see, though, right? Same with Switzerland, with Roman Josi and Nico Hischier. Being like, all right, guys, you're playing 32 minutes each of you tonight. Josi, you're not coming off the ice in the third period. It'd be so cool to see.
Slovakia, Slavkovsky would be the most important forward. Like, Tomáš Tatar is up there as well. Pospisil is a good player, and... Eric Cernak, whatever. So like even Slovakia, who only has 8 NHL players, the players they have are fairly good, but like none of them rival the top teams. So really it is a 2-team tournament, I think. It would take something crazy to happen for it not to be a Canada-USA final.
I would absolutely love... 16 teams would be the perfect number because that's just perfect symmetry in terms of how you can scale it from 16 to 8 to 4, It's probably too much for hockey. Hockey's probably like Germany as your 9th team. I don't know. Is it Latvia as your 10th? And it gets very, but if you can
Austria,
you can get those top 8 in, then I think you're having a grand old time. Russia is the wild card to me because I've said Canada has the 2 best forwards in the world. You can make a very strong case. Russia has number 3 and number 4. With Kucherov and Kaprizov. Like, I know Draisaitl's the one guy that's kind of sticking his thumb in there being like, excuse me, don't forget about me, sir. But it's Kaprizov, Kucherov I think they're very much like the next guys up. And Russia's issue has always been like, from a defense standpoint, they're like, what is this? It's like, Russia will lose all their games 6-4. The great equalizer though, is they have, if you're drafting goalies for big games, Andrei Vasilevsky is probably the first guy off the board. No offense to Connor Hellebuck. He's going to win the MVP. But when you look at their track record, and it's not just about winning the Stanley Cup, it's the long track record of Vasilevsky being an absolute killer in the first round, the second round, the third round, the fourth round repeatedly.
Yeah.
And Hellebuck not being that. Vasilevsky is the number one pick when it comes to goalies right now. He just is. So you combine those two amazing forwards with Ovechkin, you have Malkin, like you still have players there. Ivan Demidov, Matvei Michkov, like they'll try to score 5 goals a game, and then you'll have Vasilevsky who can absolutely steal you games. They're the one other team of like, if they're able to play in this tournament next year, what do? Sweden's good. They were a little banged up. I wonder, it certainly Finland was as well. I think they can make a bit more noise, but I don't think anyone's picking them to win the tournament. Like next year, the Olympics come around. If Russia's involved, you have 10 people picking who are the winners. 5 are going to pick Canada, 4 are going to pick USA, 1's going to pick Russia. I think that's what it would be, with Sweden and Finland kind of hovering around, and Czechia always providing, like Czechia, Slovakia, Switzerland will always be there to screw things up. Latvia always has one game where their goalie has 59 saves. Yeah. And whether that's in the group stage or the knockouts, that is always to be determined, but they're always around. So yeah, I definitely noticed the gap this year between Canada, USA, and Sweden, Finland. But yeah, it's going to be I'm happy international hockey is back to close out on all of this. Like this tournament was a blast. I thought like calling it the Four Nations face off, I still think the branding was a little weird. The lead up to it was a little weird. Well, holy moly. It was awesome to have international hockey back. As a big soccer fan, I'm always very jealous that people get to have those huge conversations every 2-3 months, whether it's like international breaks or they have their big tournaments every 2 to 4 years. We don't get that really in hockey. Hopefully this is a return to form, because it's so fun to be able to I usually hate this guy, but now he's on my team. Let's root for him. And, you get to kind of recobble the team back together, especially they've built 4 games worth of chemistry. That's not nothing. And I would presume 80 to 90% of this team is going to be the same in Milan next year. So it's really cool. Hopefully it's back. The Olympics in 26. There's supposed to be a World Cup in 28, although I put a big question mark on that, because what's it going to look like if you don't have the double IHF's involvement? It to me is a huge question mark. And then Olympics in 30, a second World Cup in 32. If we're doing this every 2 years, I would like to see some differences between the Olympic tournament and the World Cup. And on another date, you and I can talk about what that looks like. But it'd be so cool to have international hockey back on a regular basis. We went 9 years, or 8.5 years, I guess, between these last 2 tournaments. And we missed out on some stuff there. Like Steven Stamkos' career barely had international hockey. And that's like a casualty there. We never got to see Stamkos kill it on the international stage, but at least we're going to see these guys now. Any final words on the Four Nations face-off?
Not specifically on that, but just on that discussion, something just popped into my head that we've been sick of the All-Star game for years, but if international tournaments become the norm, and this year and next year, that's what it is, Olympics next year, maybe by 2027, there'll be a demand or an interest in doing an All-Star game again, because historically there have been good All-Star games. Yeah. Frankly, maybe there'll be a return to form in terms of that, because as we said on multiple occasions, with Four Nations, you're missing out on some incredible players who would be at an All-Star game. So maybe there's that as well, but the international tournaments coming back is definitely the highlight. That's such a back burner thing, the All-Star, but it might be nice to see that come back. It's been a part of the NHL for years historically, so it'd be pretty interesting to see that come back.
Last thing, my worry, this is very much concern trolling here, but 2 things. One is the NHL saw how popular this was and are going to try to oversaturate the market and have this be every year. And my huge worry would be they just make it a Canada, USA best of 5. In 2027, that's what it is. And then 28's the World Cup. And then 29's back to a best of 5. And 2030 is the Olympics. I'm a little worried. There's 3% of me that's crap. Did the NHL kind of figure out this works too much and they're going to try to dilute the product? Part of what makes the World Cup so awesome is that it's every 4, FIFA World Cup. It's every 4 years. The Euros are every 4 years. Now they rotate, and that's the importance of having the tournaments feel different. We know what the Euros and the Copa, Canada was in the Copa America last year, and then they're going to be in the World Cup. They're different feelings, those tournaments. Yeah. Basketball struggles with that. They have the FIBA World Cup, and then they have the Basketball Olympics. And one is 32 teams. It's mega, and the other one is very small. It's 8 to 10 teams. Please keep it to biannual every 2 years at the most, and make it different. That would be my preference, to make it feel unique still.
Yeah, that's important. What do you think of this idea that I've seen thrown around a little bit is rivalry series where you have Canada, USA, best of 3 or best of 5, whatever you said. Sweden, Finland also get one. And then also like Czechia, Slovakia maybe get one. And then maybe Switzerland, Germany. Because like these are all realistic battles that would be interesting games. Like you said off the top when we started the Four Nations discussion, Sweden, Finland was one of the best games in the tournament.
Yes.
And obviously Canada, USA had incredible games. And then Czechia, Slovakia, they used to be one country and now they're not. I can't see a closer rivalry being created than that. You know what I mean? Like, and they both have a similar amount of players in the NHL. Czechia outweighs Slovakia, certainly, but Slovakia has a lot of young guys coming up. That could be interesting. Any interest in that, or is that my grasping?
I don't love the rivalry series idea. That's a personal thing. I don't know what the answer would be yet. The Olympics have 12 teams. Like, I think the ideal one would be to follow what basketball does, where it's like the Olympics are very tight. Like, it's very hard to get to the Olympics. And the World Cup, it's like it's a celebration of hockey. We have 16 teams there. But I also recognize the overlap with what the World Championships are. Like, the NHL and the IIHF have to kind of reconcile to kind of find it. Because it'd be great to have like a 16 team tournament. It's a huge celebration of hockey, but it becomes a lot more complicated. The tournament becomes a lot longer. I don't think that's something we're going to solve today, but that would be the thing. Like, make sure they feel different between the Olympics and a World Cup. Anyways, let's wrap it up there. The Four Nations was a blast. The Habs coming back on Saturday and kicking the Sens' butt was a blast. Also, I think that was the most Habs fans I've ever seen at the Canadian Tire Center. I was not there, but you could hear them from where I live. So we're back almost at the 3/4 point of the season. We'll be back next week to talk about that. We'll do our 3 stars so far of the season, a few burning questions as we get back into the swing of things with the Montreal Canadiens. We appreciate you all for listening to This Week in Habsland. Yeah, you can follow us on social media at HabslandPod on Blue Sky and TikTok. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And until next Monday, go Habs.